welcome to day 3 of the Empowering Visions Challenge. I am super stoked that you are here. We're going to talk about my favorite topic, which is habits. And yeah, I mean, we've got a lot to dive into. So since this is the Empowering Visions Challenge, of course, we have to tap into visions, right? We got to talk about our vision again. We got to get right into that. And one thing I want to remind you about when we're talking about vision, especially when it's a big vision, a big goal, a big dream, something you're going after, something that's a stretch, something that's going to take a little bit of time, a lot of effort. And well, the biggest thing to remember about this is other people, they don't see your vision. Your vision is your vision and it's in your mind. So at first, especially when you're first starting to do this and you're like, yeah, I see this thing and that, they don't see your vision, right? It's like people, they'll talk about like having like different glasses, right? Different prescriptions. If you put on somebody else's lenses, you can't see as well, right? Or you can't, maybe you can see better. I don't know, but you don't have their prescription, right? So remember that when you're going through building a big vision or you're going after something that is bigger, just because everybody around you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not still good, that it's not that it's your vision, right? So I think that that is super important to understand, because you'll have people around you that even you might be talking about this vision about for a long time around them, and yet because they don't have your lenses, they don't see what you're talking about 100%. So it's very important to keep that in mind, because then you won't get discouraged when they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like you've been talking about that for a while, or you're just it's just, they don't see it, right? So make sure that you're understanding and aware that that might happen. So the next piece of that, and this is where we get into really that cultivating, developing, and a lot of the things we talked about with strategy, is you got to enroll people in your vision. You got to enroll them in your goals, your dreams, what the things that you're doing. You got to enroll them in your life. So you have to become an influencer, right? So we are all leaders. All of us are leaders. We might not be aware that we're a leader, but we are leading. And number one, we need to be leading ourselves, but we are leading everyone around us because they're watching what we're doing. So you have to be able to influence those around you with your vision, to share your vision, to get them excited, to get them to see their part in your vision, especially if it's something big, right? If it's not bigger than us, many people will say it's not worth really going after. So if you're going after a big vision, goal, or dream that's like much larger than you, understand that they might not see it in the lenses. And it's super important to be always testing, trying, putting it out there, sharing, getting excited about it, and bringing people around your vision, right? So that's where I want to start with vision today. Now, I also want you to tap into that vision that you have, thinking about what it looks like. And once again, if you're new to the whole idea of visions, and this is the first time you've gotten to hear any of this, that's okay. Just think of, what would the best day look like? I don't know, 3 years from now. What does that look like? What are you doing? What do you spend your day doing? How does it feel? Who are you around? What animals are there? And just kind of get that idea, and that's how you can start to cultivate that vision, right? So, but if you have a really big vision, you're tapped into it. What is it? What does it make you feel like? How does that how are you leaning into that vision, right? How are you as a person? What is your identity in that vision, right? So just kind of tap into that as we're going to start to look at really the secret sauce in achieving that. And yesterday we talked about strategy. We talked about the mindset and what kind of perspectives and mindset and thought processes we have to have. We talked about modeling and really taking the idea of looking at what's working for other people and utilizing that. Now, not in a comparison type of way, right? But in a way that you're like, hey, that's a path, that's the way they're doing it, let's try that, right? Because remember, we also talked about having to be testing the pieces of the puzzle, right? So also in the momentum, right? Really understanding that when you're starting for that big vision, it's going to take a lot of energy to get it going and then to be able to sustain that momentum, right? So in the beginning, when your vision is not as clear as you might think it is, when other people are like, I don't see it, remember that is part of the building the momentum, right? You're getting clarity, and then you're going to start to understand how you're going to articulate and get other people enrolled in your vision, right? So you're going to gain that momentum, and you're going to influence people in ways, especially if you're doing it in the way that Tony Robbins teaches. You're adding so much value to the marketplace with all of the things that you are presenting and giving, that you're enrolling people in that because it's for the betterment of everybody around, right? It's for the people that are enrolled in your vision. It's for the community that the vision serves. It's for that business. And it's also just for our world to make it better, right? So that is really my thought process on vision today. And I want to jump into habits. So habits, I know they're not sexy, right? Well, first off, I know I mentioned it the other day, but let's really think about this. About 50% of what you do every day, during the day, all day, are habits. They are just things that happen that you are automatically doing. You get off at that exit the same time every time, and pretty soon you're doing that and you don't even remember how you got there, right? You see something. And the way that habits work is they are set up with triggers. They are cue-based. So something happens, and then after that happens, you do something, right? They're triggered. So because of that, it's super important to understand that it's the intentional habits that I'm talking about here, the things that we are doing that are in alignment with that vision. And one piece of this is to look at it as practices. They're kind of like routines. They're a rhythm that you're going to start getting into that helps you move the needles forward on the bigger vision that you're going after. So we're going to really look at the habits that we're going to put into play are really put into play so that you can empower your vision, so you can have your vision come to reality, right? So that is specifically the ones that we're going to look at. And I want to talk about habits themselves. So a couple things. One, if you have a habit that you don't like, that you realize is not serving you, it's much easier to take that habit and then bump it out of the way by implanting another one in it, right? So if we're talking about human behavior change, we're going to talk a little bit about the ability and the possibility that you can take a bad habit and turn it around into something else, or you can implement a different habit in that place. So that's one place to start with it. The second place is when you're doing habits and when you're implementing habits. Some people say it takes 30 days, 66 days. All I know is it really is a decision. And the second way to make a habit really happen is to track it. If you're not tracking something, you can't improve it. So I have found personally that when I actually track specific habits, the consistency continues to get better. And in the very beginning, please understand that if you're implementing a new habit, it might take you a little bit to be able to do that. It might take a few moments of, oops, I didn't do that habit today, right? But if you're tracking it over a period of time, I personally like to look at it on a weekly basis. And I like to pick, and we'll talk about the types of habits. I like to have them in my schedule, and I like to actually document how much of it I've done. And then that way I'm like, oh, I only did that habit 30% of the time this month. I did it 60%, and you'll actually see yourself improve, right? So if you're not measuring it, you can't improve it. The other thing about the ability to like bump a habit out, there's also the thought process of stacking habits. And when you're stacking habits, what you're doing is you're doing some habit that you already do, and then you're going to add a second habit to that. So say you come in the door and you lose your keys all the time. Instead, now you're going to have an intentional habit of come indoor, put keys on key hook. And by stacking the habits, you actually have a lot more power and the ability to start doing them more quickly. Now, the other thing that we're going to talk about is on Friday, we're going to walk through the WHOOP framework, and that is going to help you create instant habits. And I think that that is another piece of the puzzle that's really helped me. It's actually a psychology research-based, like scientific, the best way out there right now to actually be able to improve your agency, your volition, your ability to take action. And we're going to go through that process on Friday. So right now, I just want to go back to one more thing I'd mentioned, I believe, yesterday, and that was really about mirror neurons. So remembering that, like, a lot of times, since your habits are influenced by cues, they're going to be environmentally based. They're going to be based on your experiences. So really being aware that, like, your mirror neurons sometimes cause a lot of the habits that we currently have. So just making sure that we're thinking of that as we're doing this. So, all right, let's get into my 4 main types of habits that I talk about and that I really keep focused on and I make sure are scheduled, right? So the other thing is, when we're doing this and we're really implementing something new and we're going after a big goal, vision, or dream, we have to schedule the pieces of the puzzle. And so that's going to tie right into number 1 is I love to look at routine habits. And I'm going to talk about my favorite routine habit, which is my morning routine. But the idea is that you have to have these routine habits scheduled, right? So whether it's a weekly, a monthly, a yearly habit, rhythm, practice, thing that you do, you got to make sure that it is on the calendar and you have these things scheduled out. So once again, my favorite is mornings. We're going to come back to that in a second. The second type of habits that I really love are realization habits. Realization habits are the ones that are going to help you realize that dream, which are going to be like skill leveling up, learning, adventure, experiences, and relationships, right? Really elevating your identity and your level and your ability is going to happen in those realization habits. Now, we're going to talk about the reset habits. Reset habits are ones that, well, you know, the high performance race car, it takes the pit stops, not because it needs a pit stop right there. It's not running out of fuel. It still has tires. It still has all of the things, right? It's still running, but they do the pit stop so that it can run longer for faster for a longer period of time. So that piece is something that we as humans really need to touch base with and get connected to. And then the 4th type of habit that I really love are the recalibration habits. Now, this one is like one of the things, I know I talked about like momentum being the thing that's so underplayed. Recalibration, also one of those topics so underplayed. It is so vital, and just implementing the habit that I will talk about today basically transform my entire ability to function, my ability to really move the needle forward and to make so much progress in developing my vision. So, all right, let's go back to routine habits. My number 1 routine habit, and I'm going to tell you that it alone, out of all the habits, is what has really helped me with my mindset. It has really helped me with my energy and my ability to focus. And that's my morning routine. So in the morning, when I wake up, I drink some ozonated water. I think water works. I like the ozonated water. I feel like it wakes me up even better than coffee. I don't know. But that takes me about 30 minutes. And so while that's happening, I do some reading. And really, it's that first ability to jump into reading to when I am just waking up, rather than checking my phone, rather than getting into a conversation. If I start reading, that is one of those habits that I have fully committed to since the beginning of last year. And every day in the last 2 years, I have read at least 20 minutes. And so while that is really my realization habit, or one of the realization habits that are my favorite, while I'm still talking about morning, I get it done in the morning. Right? So it's part of my morning routine. It's part of my realization habits, but it's on the schedule and I make sure that it happens. That one is a non-negotiable for me. The water's a non-negotiable for me. And the other things that I do in the morning is I really connect to my vision, which is why it's also such a critical piece of the puzzle, right? Really, before I get distracted with other things that's going on, people's dramas and other pieces, I really hone in on what it is that I'm working on. And then really looking at like setting up the day as to like what are the important pieces today, right? So one thing about vision is we've got this big vision, we got this big thing, and we're still here in the present. So we have to take the next best step today to make that happen, right? So you're gonna have this big vision and you're gonna be working towards that, and you're gonna let your mind think about it. And what we're gonna work on Friday with the whoop, you have to overcome the obstacles in your way that are here today. And so that morning routine of getting in the right mindset, doing some reading, getting some hydration, and then of course I always have to go see the horses because I take care of the horses. So for me, that is like me moving around. I'm connecting with the animals, and that is part of my morning routine. And that is how I get started. And that alone, like just implementing that piece of the puzzle was an absolute game changer for me. Now, having that as a very consistent thing that I've done for quite some time, I can tell you that it helps me tremendously. And I wouldn't be where I am now without it. So I recommend, as far as a routine habit, if you don't have a morning routine yet, you got to get one going. You don't have to take an entire hour to do it. If you only do things for 5 minutes when you're starting, right? If you're like, okay, Lisa, that's great. You read for 20 minutes. I don't got like, I'm running out the door. I don't have time for this. Maybe it's 5 minutes. Whatever it is, just start the morning routine and start those habits. I promise it'll change your life. So I was just saying, my favorite realization habit is reading. And I'm going to also say, it's going back to that learning mindset, right? So anytime that we have that big goal, that big vision, that big dream, we have to skill up. We absolutely are going to have to get better at doing something. Otherwise, you'd already be doing the thing you want to do. So because we have to skill up, to make sure that you have that development side of things in your schedule. So this is not like, well, I have the idea that I might want to do these things. It's like, no, it actually has to be in your schedule and you have to be doing it. And that is one of the ways that they can tell like a high performer from somebody who's just kind of in reaction, is that high performer is really skilling up. They really have that in their schedule, whether it's listening to podcasts, whether it's reading books, whether it's taking courses, any of those, mentoring, like any of those pieces of the puzzle will help you get there. But just making sure that you actually really have that in your schedule. All right, now let's talk reset. Reset habits. I think this one was the idea of implementing reset habits. I think really has also been, for my well-being, has been one of the bigger pieces of the puzzle, right? So I struggled for a long time with lots of migraines. I was stressed out. I don't know, I would get burnout. And implementing reset habits is the thing that really shifted it for me. I stopped having headaches. I sleep very well at night now. I'm not running through the day. Like people will be like, you've got to be so crazy. You have all these things going on. I'm like, no, not really. Like I'm organized in that. And I think that is because of the reset habits. So what happens for most people is most people are going throughout the day from one thing to the next, 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 to the next. No wonder they're exhausted by the time they get to the end of the day. They're like, that was so many things. Where all you have to do is be slightly more intentional and just take a moment in between the actions that you're doing. So maybe you do your emails and then you get done with emails, take a moment, be like, okay, that is done. Here's my moment. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to ground myself. I'm going to center. And then I'm going to set intention for the next action. So it doesn't take more of your time to do this. It just takes being intentional, right? So it's that cue, right? The habit to implement these types of habits. It's really the cue. Finished assignment, finished action, take a break, take a pause. So one of these that helps me so much is taking daily pauses. Now, my daily pauses is 10 minutes lying down with my eyes closed. And I could meditate. I can think about things. I don't have to think about anything. There's not anything like so structured in that other than 10 minutes at least, eyes closed, lying down. And it took me, like in the beginning when I first started doing this, it took me probably 4 months to actually implement this on a real pattern. It was a 20% I was getting it done. And then I just kept at it. And now if I get midday and I haven't taken a pause, I'm like, my brain is feeling pretty fuzzy about now. I think I need a pause. So it's crazy how when you implement these things, it really freaking happens, right? So it works. So that one is, I think, my favorite of the resets. And I just had a thought of something else on habits I want to say. I'll come back to it because I'm sure I'll remember it. But definitely the other types of reset habits that I like are gratitude journaling, right? So that is something that helps me remember, especially when you're getting tired or you're exhausted. It's like remembering the things that you have that you're grateful for is one of the quickest ways to get back to serenity, to get back to, okay, things are okay, life will be okay, right? So those resets. Then recalibration habits. So the thing about recalibration habits is, I know we talk about how when the airplane takes off from Los Angeles going to New York, it's going to have to recalibrate along the way. When machines are running, the specialist has to come in and recalibrate the machine, right? So what's crazy is that the way that you feel now, right now, is really based on what has happened on the last 72 hours. Okay. What Brennan Bouchard will call meds RX, which is your meditation, exercise, diet, sleep, relationships, and supplements. And in that thought process, whatever's happened over the last 72 hours, like I know normally we'll be like, oh, I ate something and I don't feel good 24 hours later. The reality is, like, the food that you ate, you're still processing 72 hours out. So it's really important to, when you're not feeling 100% and you're like, wow, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. It's not just the last 24 hours. It is actually the last 72. So one thing because of that I found that's super helpful for me is when I get midweek, when I get to Tuesday even, I reset myself by doing 72-hour planning forward. Okay, so I really look at what are the things that are going to have to happen the next 72 hours from where I am now. And that helps me get out of overwhelm, and it helps me really be able to take action on the important pieces of the puzzle. And since I implemented that strategy in itself, which if you guys do the sprint with me or some of the monthly stuff, and I'm sure I have it probably on some other content that I've done, but I can walk through that a little bit more. And that itself has been a game changer as well. Just having the ability to go, okay, so I know I have this whole week, but like, what do I got to do in the next 72 hours? And if I have like a big event or something coming up, to understand that the 72 hours leading up to that event, I need to be very aware of how much I am sleeping, what I'm eating, how much I'm moving, and really like how my relationships are going. Like if I'm not getting along with somebody, that could explain why I wasn't feeling well, right? So I think really taking those pieces of the puzzle into play are super, super critical. So those are my favorite pieces on habits. I can actually probably talk about habits, I don't know, all day. I do want to try and keep this to the shorter 30 minutes. The call to action today is really going to be to put in the group, what of these types of habits are you going to make sure that you put into play for the new year? Or what is something over the next pause or the next few weeks that you're going to put into play? And just kind of wrap on that a little bit. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. That is pretty much the basics of habits. And I look forward to expanding on that in the future. I've got so much more topics on that, but I just wanted to keep it kind of tight just to introduce the idea that really when you're going after your goal, vision, or dream, and you've got to put into your schedule these types of habits, and how much just these alone, these 4 alone, having some routines, some realization, reset, and recalibration habits have been the game changer. I mean, I can tell you how many people I've watched do their thing, get an event done, and then absolutely burn out. And I can tell you that it's these habits that keep me being able to go for a longer period of time with great energy and insane focus. So it's like the more that and the better that I get at them, the more focused and the more just at peace I personally am. So this is why I highly recommend getting into them, because game changer for my own fulfillment and my own experience of life based on these for sure. So, all right, awesome. I'm going to stop recording.